Hello, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a homebrew campaign in real time so that you can see all the steps and thought processes that go into my methods for writing adventures and campaigns, warts and all, as they say. I'm RJ Kerr, I'm your host. And if you are just joining us for the very first time, we are in the process of creating like I said, a homebrew campaign with a custom domain of Dread included. And we've already done a fair amount of work on this, and we're going to be continuing that process today. Just to get you kind of caught up, we have already figured out how our characters get into this domain of dread through a portal that opens on the blood moon. We've talked about what kind of motivations would draw them in. We have figured out where they start, where they land once they're in this domain of dread, a shanty town called Darkport that's on the edge of an inland sea. We figured out that this inland sea is a huge part of this domain of dread, and that it was once a basin that hosted a thriving metropolis, now fallen into ruin and flooded. We've figured out that we have an elemental villain, Ovander, that is contained within this domain of dread. We've written our very first adventure for our characters, where they are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors, and in doing so, learn about the existence of an artifact of power, which gives the wielder some control over this domain of dread. And as they escape, they learn that this is probably their best option for getting out of the domain alive. And so they've got to go forth and find it. And now we're working on a part of the campaign where the characters get to be proactive and start getting out into the world and looking for this artifact. Now, that's a really kind of open ended thing, and it makes a very sandboxy kind of world for this. And so, to give ourselves a little bit of structure, we're using what I call a node structure style adventure. And you can use node structure for a lot of things. They get used for mysteries quite a bit. They're really useful for that kind of thing. Um, this isn't so much. Well, this is a little bit of a mystery. There's definitely some mystery elements to this, and so it works well. But effectively, what we're doing is, since we don't know where the characters are going to go first and what they're going to decide to do, we are populating the world with clues, and each of these clues lead to different nodes, or also known as investigative scenes. And that those are little mini adventures, they're encounters, they're things like that that the characters can engage with, and can find other clues that lead to other nodes and move the story forward, eventually leading to the place where this artifact has been lost, and so they can recover it. And we can move on in our adventure. Now, again, we've already done a bunch of work for this. We've figured out a bunch of the clues we're going to use. We've come up with a bunch of the nodes in sort of general terms. Uh, and we've built out one adventure using the 5 room dungeon model. Now we're building in a second using a modified version of the 5 room dungeon model, where we have a multitude of shipwrecks that have been gathered around a natural stone arc off a seaside cliff. The ships have been repurposed into a castle like structure that has become a Sahuagin stronghold, and the characters are here seeking a ship's log that has clues as to the last known location of the artifact. And we decided this could be a cool heist style adventure. And so we've been writing it as such using a modified 5 room dungeon structure, what I kind of casually call the 5 scene structure, where we're not imagining these rooms as physical places, we're imagining them as moments within the narrative, within the story. So let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we can kind of real quick get through that, and then we will get to writing in the adventure. So the 5 scene structure follows this 5 room dungeon pretty closely, with a few modifications. For one, the scene the first scene is the entry, just like in a 5 room dungeon, but instead of it being a physical portal into a dungeon, this is the moment where the characters start planning their encounter. They start planning how they're going to go about their heist, and how they're gonna make their incursion into this stronghold. And so we've built that out with the kind of information that they might be able to go out and collect, and what they might be able to do to get that information. Then we have our setback, which would be our second room of a 5 room dungeon. And here we're thinking more in broad terms. What happens when things go wrong during the heist? And so we're thinking about, how do different encounter groups become activated? How do they start moving around? How do they become alert and start looking for trouble? And how do they raise the alarm when they find it? What happens when they raise the alarm? And then what happens if things go completely sideways and the characters get captured? The third is the puzzle in a five-room dungeon. I would almost call it more of the challenge in the five-scene dungeon. And that's pretty simple in this case. It's find the object they're there to steal. And so we've gone through and created a bunch of keyed locations where we've given ourselves some descriptions and we've noted that we might want some treasure in certain places, hazards in others, and gave ourselves a couple little notes there. What we did not do is put encounters in each of these rooms. Well, we haven't put encounters in the descriptions of each of these rooms. Instead, we've put them in an action group list so that they can be more dynamic. And we have a centralized list of encounters that allows them to sort of more easily move about the stronghold. And so we can create a greater sense of the stronghold being a living structure of people actually living and working here. The last two rooms would be in a five-room dungeon would be the BBEG, or a big bad evil guy. In this case, it's our climax, and this is how things sort of become more challenging on the way out of the adventure. So the characters have recovered the object they're looking for. Now they have one more obstacle, one more major obstacle to overcome before they can escape. In this case, we came up with the idea that maybe a group, an envoy from the Slod-led faction, the uh, um, also seeking the ship's log, is here and now has thrown kind of the stronghold into chaos. As you have more people who are looking for it, they can realize that it's missing. They might become hunting for it. And we can kind of activate some of these groups that perhaps have not been activated, make escaping more difficult than it was getting in. And then, of course, the last scene or last room is the reward, and the five-room dungeon or in the five-room dungeon that might be a physical reward or an information reward. In a five-scene dungeon, in this case, it's more of an information reward. It's the moment that they get the information they need to move the story forward. In this case, the clues left in the ship's log. So we've done a ton of this already. And so for the time that we have today, I think we are going to start working on maybe some of these hazards, I think, because we've gotten pretty much everything else kind of put in other than the treasure. Now, we could certainly run this adventure with what we have already and kind of make up the other bits as we go and improvise hazards as needed and that kind of deal. But we've got the time, we might as well put in the energy. So before we jump into that, let me remind everybody this is a interactive live stream, so please feel free to hop in the chat and give me your thoughts, feelings, ideas as we go along here. Ask any questions that you'd like, and as we go, we'll get rocking and rolling here. Looks like we've already got a couple comments in the chat. Jonathan Frost says, "Welcome back, RJ. Yeah, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me. Good to see everybody here." Mr. Mech says, "Hey RJ, welcome back. How was the convention? The Huntsville Comic and Pop Culture Expo, which is where I was at this weekend. It was a ton of fun. Highly recommend that if you're in the Huntsville area for it next year, that you check it out. We had a huge gaming room and a lot of stuff going on. Not just D&D, but a ton of TTRPGs, a bunch of one-shots, all kinds of learn-to-play games, everything from Warhammer to board games to other TTRPGs like Vampire the Masquerade and all that kind of stuff, Call of Cthulhu. It was a cool time, very cool time. We even had in one evening we had a D&D tournament, which was a lot of fun. 5 tables playing the same one shot and trying to beat each other in their solutions for it and their role playing and that kind of deal with prizes for everyone. So it was a terrific time. Okay, so let's see here. Let's talk about our hazards. We talked about some sea life hazards that we would want in this place to kind of add a yeah and to kind of add a little bit of more of a nautical vibe to some of the stuff to remind the characters that they're really in the sea for parts of this. The part of the strongholds is submerged and flooded, and there's sea life hazards. And so we're going to start building out some of those, and we'll pair those with the rooms within our key locations. Real quick, Mr. Mech says, "It's Greg, Cal." Yep, I recognize the screen name. And he said, "I wish we had a convention like that here. Not a huge D&D presence here." Yeah, I completely understand. Unfortunately, some places just don't have it. We're really lucky to have that kind of thing in Huntsville. But highly recommend checking one of those out if you can get to a community that has them. even if it's just for the weekend. It's a good time. We had a bunch of people who flew in, a couple people from places like California and what have you. They came out to the convention just for the community, which was a lot of fun. Okay, so let's see here. We have talked about some things like fire coral, stinging algae, remoras. We have blowfish, poison needle trap. We've got razor barnacles. Oh, excuse me. I'm still recovering from the con. I'm frankly still worn out. um, so much going on. Um, and so let's kind of look through this and come up with some other hazards here that we have got that we might have listed here. We talked about suspended nets. So that might be something that we might want to work on there. Let's see if there's anything else. We've got the blowfish trap there. We came up with one that was an anemone that's unique to the temple because the altar is an anemone. So we probably don't need to repeat that elsewhere. We've got the remoras. We've got fire coral, so that's up there. Okay, cool. So we've managed to, good on us. We have actually kept a running comprehensive list. So now we can kind of detail out how we want these to go. And let's see, we got another comment. It says, Jonathan Frost says, glass and maybe crystal is almost invisible when submerged in water. Yeah, what were you thinking to make glass and or crystal, Jonathan? Let me know, because yeah, always it's making some of the traps and hazards, that kind of deal, out of glass and crystal. Yeah, making them hard to spot for sure. If you want to do that, well, gosh, excuse me. Sorry, like I said, I'm still worn out from the convention. Just a lot going on. Okay, so let's say, let's start with our fire coral here. I think that'll be pretty straightforward. Fire coral, remora, and razor barnacles. Let's start with these, and let's build these out here as we go. Ben Elder says, bound water elemental guardians. It's not a bad idea. It's a question of where would we put them, and where would we want to add that kind of stuff. Water elementals. Let's see what the challenge rating is on those. I want to say they're like a CR5, which might be a little high for this particular encounter, but they definitely have a place somewhere in our campaign. Let's say I've got D&D Beyond up on the other window here. I should just search water elemental instead of water elementals. Okay, so the new one, yeah, CR5 for third level characters, it's pretty tough. Let's see. So maybe they may not be a good fit here, or maybe we want one of them somewhere. Let's think about that. There's definitely a place for them somewhere in this campaign, whether it's this particular adventure or not. Bound water elementals is a good idea, and we should keep that somewhere. Let's add that to our comments over here. Bound water elementals as guardians, ? Cool. Okay. All right. Let's think about our fire cooler here. We're thinking some basic sort of nautical traps, some sort of sea life hazards here that are effectively, we're writing them as traps, right? And there's a couple ways that you can kind of go about creating traps. Frequently, I'll use some of the improvised damage tables, but they've got some good resources in the DMG for that kind of thing. So let me get one of those open here. Let's get the new one, the 2024 open. We'll get it to the traps section. So kind of look for some of the tables. And did not take me directly to traps. Let's see what I can find here. Creating a spell, not what I want. Curses, all the way down to the bottom is what I think we want here. Traps. Okay. Yeah, parts of a trap. So we're thinking about how what is the purpose of a trap? What is how serious is of a setback is it going to be? Is it perhaps lethal? Is it just an inconvenience? Does it just kind of burn some things? And so we have some example traps in the DMG here, the new DMG. But there is also an improvised damage table that works well if we want to do that sort of thing. Let's see here. Ben says maybe parts of the ship wood that make up the castle is really rotten, and a failure on perception check means your leg goes through, piercing damage and restrained. Yeah, we could do something like that, especially in some of the places that aren't flooded. So what we're thinking about that, because that's a really good note here. Let's bounce around a little, and let's say other hazards. Let's say rotted wood. TBD. I'm going to just put glass trap in here. I don't even know what that would be yet, but I like the idea of having something that is nearly invisible when we have it underwater somewhere. So we can always use it or not use it. It's entirely up to us as we put along. But it's a good idea to capture these ideas as we go, so we don't forget them. But fire coral. Let's say. Let's make this another. I would say we make this another kind of saving throw kind of deal, or take damage as opposed to, for example, our blowfish poison needle trap where it's become paralyzed. I don't know if you've ever had any experience with fire coral, but it stings like the dickens. So I think we could do some fire damage. That would be kind of interesting underwater as we do that. So let's say natural fire coral and other stinging algae. Other stinging algae, I guess, is the plural. Other stinging algae grow, even though coral isn't technically algae, I know. Let's see here. Natural fire coral and other stinging algae grow on some submerged surfaces. Any creature comes in contact with one of these surfaces must make a DC. Do we want this to be easy, difficult? What do we want this to be here? Because last time we talked about making it a DC 12 or DC 16, and we split the difference and we said DC 14. And we can just keep using a DC 14 if we want to be, but I personally like to mix up the difficulty, the difficulty class for traps and hazards and that kind of deal, just so that there's a little bit of variation. Some things are easier, some things are way harder, some things are kind of middle of the road as we go. But let's say well, considering where it's growing, because I think we planned on putting this in the library around the book. Let's make it a DC 16. Let's make it a challenging trap here. Um, Ben Elder says, I think DC 12, as I'm picturing Fire Coral, as being bright and easy to see. It can be. It blends in with a lot of stuff sometimes, though. Um, but all right, well, let's do it. Let's make it 12. Let's make it 12. Let's make it easy to see. Let's make it easier. And then we'll just put more of it in there. In contact with the service DC 12, should we say Constitution or Dexterity saving throw? Probably a Dex, I'm thinking, to avoid touching it, to kind of realize it's there and not and not touch the surface. Um, Saving throw or take, and I'm also thinking this is more of a nuisance than like a killer. And so I'm going to say we take 1d10 fire damage, not reduced by submersion in water. Because I think, off the top of my head, I have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure fire damage is halved if the target is submerged in water typically. So we want to note that that's not the case in this. That it transfers even in water. Cool. So we have a nice little hazard right there, nice and easy. The Remora, I think, is more of an attack roll. I don't want to make it a creature per se. I'm thinking it's almost like an arrow trap is kind of what we're potentially triggering here, and that it's just a continuous sort of thing that the character that tries to latch onto the characters, to bite the characters every so often. So let's say. Biting Remoras prowl among the sharks of the stronghold. They attempt to nip at anyone who gets too close while in the affected area. Characters must make affected area. Remoras target the characters. Make a attack roll. Let's say +4. That's a good number. We can attack roll +4 against each targeted character. On a hit, the character takes, we're going to say 1d6, I think, piercing damage, and the Remora latches on. Actually, we'll say and is grappled. That's mechanical, and that's a little bit better. So on a hit, the character takes 1d6 piercing damage and is grappled. We'll say while grappled, the character takes an additional 1d6 piercing damage at the start of each of their turns. Let's put an escape DC. Let's make this one higher. Let's make this one a 16 because they can really kind of sucker on there. So, when I'm writing traps, I don't often worry too much about thinking about how they might be able to be disabled in like a specific kind of way. Um, Frequently because I find that when I do, I make them very specific, and then my players don't come up with those ideas, and I end up having to kind of roll with whatever the cool idea the characters come up with anyway. So frequently, I may just kind of think about the sorts of things that I might allow to disable a particular trap. For example, with the remoras here, maybe releasing a different target, other fish, um, something else that's, sending an illusion swimming through the water or something along those lines might deter them, or might draw them, or that kind of deal. And so, wouldn't give myself too much of a headache worrying about it right now. And I'll just kind of let my characters come up with a cool solution. And if it seems reasonable, yeah, we'll make it work. We'll come up with you know, a DC or something like that. And frequently, I'll use the same DC as whatever a DC is set for a particular trap or hazard, that kind of deal, just to keep things simple for myself. So like a DC 16 to kind of lure the remoras away, or to in effect, deactivate that trap. Whereas like the fire coral, maybe scraping it off a surface is a DC 12 to avoid coming in contact with it or something along those lines. Um, and same kind of deal for this needle trap, right? Make it a DC 14 to disarm it in a more typical kind of way. Ben Elder says, would it be overkill to add maybe a luck roll if the attack lands to see if blood in the water would summon a shark or Sahuagin or trigger a feeding frenzy? Um, hmm. Hmm. What a delightfully, what, what a delightfully chaotic idea. I actually really like that. In fact, I would say that we don't just put it on the remora kind of stuff here. I'd say we make it just a hazard that blood in the water, that when characters take damage during this, there's a chance that a shark or a Sahuagin senses it, that they are activated when they're underwater. So let's add another hazard. Blood in the water. Um, TBD. That's a really cool idea. I like that. We're just going to say, because we're getting close to our end time here, so we're going to say possibly, um, actually, we'll say injured characters possibly summon sharks or Sahuagin by bleeding into the water. And I know that this isn't like, the trap is not kind of detailed out, or how we're going to run it isn't detailed out yet, but I want that note in there so that next time we can kind of dig into that, because that's a really cool effect, I think, here. Something that we can kind of use against them in a lot of fun ways, and add a lot of add a little more challenge to it as they move through the adventure. That's a really good idea, Ben. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, real quick, we're pretty much at our time. We've got like 60 seconds left, so why don't we go ahead and put a pin in it here, and we'll pick up with this next time. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining me today. I'm sorry we missed Monday. I'll be honest with you, I was completely wiped slick after running double-digit hours of D&D over the weekend, and then just attending the con and all that kind of stuff. Cosplayed as Gale, by the way, from Baldur's Gate 3. That was a lot of fun. I started really enjoying to do that, and gave out a whole bunch of dice. I would love to see you guys at one of the cons sometime. I'll be at Dragon Con this year as well, if you're going to be around. So I would love to meet anybody who's going to be at that. But in the meantime, if you enjoy my content and you want to see more of it, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that kind of stuff helps the channel grow, and brings more people in, and fills out our live chat here as we go. And if you ever want to jump into one of my games, come check out my tables at startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. You can find all of my active sessions there, all the ones that are online. And if you don't see anything that suits you, hit that request a booking one, and we can do custom games at custom times, whether that's one shots or campaigns in their entirety. Anyway, thank you again so much, everybody. I look forward to seeing you guys again, and we'll pick this up for real on Monday. Talk to you soon. Bye now.